Santi.
Chaplain Milton.
Hey.
Good to be back, bro.
Yeah, man. It's
Wake
so
Up,
good.
Die.
This is the Wake Up Die podcast. Welcome. Glad you came to join us. This podcast is all about figuring out how to live the best life possible. And we understand, you and I, that the best life possible is to live it by first waking up and then dying. And that happens as you follow Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely, bro, because that's the formula. What we talked about on the previous episodes is waking up is acknowledging something needs to change. I can't keep going on like this. And dying is surrendering. Like, my way wasn't working, so what does God have to say about this? When I was praying about it, I feel like what he's been showing me in my life is in Mark 12, 30 through 31. Jesus has asked, what's the most important commandment? And that's a heavy ask. That's got to be, there's so much that God's word says to do, to not to do, encouragement. And Jesus sums it up in this one phrase. And he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Okay.
That's what everything hangs on. And I feel like if we were to approach those areas and say, okay, I need to wake up and die in my life. So let's go one by one in each of those areas. I need to wake up, find out what's wrong in this area. What's wrong with my heart? What needs to change? Because it's not working the way it is. And then to die is, how do I surrender that to God? And we run each of those categories through the formula.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the people who watch this and listen to this will really grab on to the practicality of what we're trying to do. Because the Christian experience, at least for me, growing up has always been, it's been so nebulous. Like, we throw out these terms, surrender and faith, and it's like, I'm not even sure what those means. Like, I can't grasp, I can't grab it. It's like if I told you, Zonti, I want you to go outside, grab this glass jar, and capture a unicorn fart. Like, you'd be like, what? What are you talking about? You said, dude, you're looking at me weird. But that's how I feel sometimes when people tell me, do this thing for God. It's like, how? How does that happen? And what you and I are going to pursue is figuring out the practical side of waking up and dying so that we can really hold on and have results. But here's a warning I want to give, okay? You pursue it a certain way, right? You're Zonti. I pursue it a certain way. But we can't expect that my formula is going to work for everybody and that your formula is going to work for everybody either, because we're all individuals. We all have a different experience, and we all approach life differently. And I want to be careful that we don't preach this as some kind of like, do these 6 steps and everything's going to be great.
Right. Because
that's what the church has been for a long time, and it hasn't worked. But what we can do is do it all together, right? Do it all towards one goal and succeed and fail together.
Yeah.
Without condemnation, without pointing fingers, and to say like, hey, this worked for you, it didn't work for me, but let's keep pursuing until we find the thing that works.
I think that's the beauty of surrender. What I found in my life that's helped me get closer to God and become the person I need to be is my number one focus is to find God's will for my life. That's the perfect answer to what you just mentioned. It's like, that way you're not one size fits all.
Right.
That way you're not trying to be somebody else or be in their calling. Wake up, die, that whole conversation is centered around finding what God has specifically for you in each of those 5 areas. For your heart, for your soul, for your mind, for your strength, how you love others. If you can wake up and surrender, if you can give everything to him, now your job is find God's will for your life. And that doesn't happen overnight. That's a process, being close to him, and we're going to talk about that. But I think that's how you avoid the, replication of what other people do and then feeling discouraged because it doesn't fit.
Exactly.
It's like, that's religion. Relationship with Jesus, with Yeshua, is I trust you. Exactly what he said. Not my will, but yours be done.
Right.
Was Jesus' prayer. Over and over, even unto the cross.
So we got these 5 areas, right, that we mentioned. And we're going to tackle them one at a time in different aspects of each one. But I believe, and I think you agree with me, tell me if you agree, that heart is, it's such a crucial part of this journey. as we we were talking, because even the word heart is like, what does that mean? And as we looked at it, as we researched it, it's kind of like the deep down buried desires that you have as an individual.
Yeah.
And I like to think of it as it's the engine.
Yeah.
It's the engine that just moves everything else.
It drives the rest of your life.
Exactly. So I think we need to start at heart.
Yeah.
Because getting that right and getting that in a good place and building that is going to make all the other areas work so much better, I think.
100%. That's your why. There's a lot of, evidence when you look at people who have achieved greatness or people who are close to God, people who have made a difference. Even, that one person in your family who everybody knows, man, they're kind and they've helped somebody, or they go out of their way to be an individual that makes change. That person is always motivated by a why. And your desire, your heart, that engine is like, what is your why? What drives you? I feel like one of the things I didn't realize when my life was kind of a mess, and not that it's perfect now, but there's purpose because I've learned how to wake up and die on a daily basis. One of the biggest, I think, pitfalls people come across is they have a subconscious why that they are not taking an intentional approach with. Out of the heart, the mouth speaks. Everything flows out of your desire. Your whole life kind of lines up. It's like when you're driving a motorcycle or even a car and you start to look in a direction, it'll automatically start to steer that way.
Dude, I do that.
And it's subconscious. And if you're not intentional about what your why is, and if you haven't given it some thought, and if you haven't given it to God and sought his face on that matter, then you're just going to be how does the Bible say, like tossed on the wind. You're not going to have clear direction. Yeah. And that why is so important. There's a verse about like how you can't be led by your heart.
That's right. Jeremiah 17:9 tells us that the heart is deceitful above all things. So you got to be careful.
All things.
All things. All things.
Yeah.
Think of the worst person you know. Okay. Your heart is worse than that person.
And okay. So when you say the heart can be deceitful above all else, it can be worse. I feel like that's exactly what I'm saying, is like the unbridled subconscious drive that you'll have from you as a human being without God's help and without a specific why is just going to be whatever feels good. It's going to be whatever protects you. It's going to be driven by your childhood trauma. It's going to be driven by things that you've walked through. And your whole life will be this game of reacting. And my mom always used to tell me, be proactive, don't be reactive.
Okay.
So what that means is, in order to wake up, die, you got to wake up to the fact that a lot of your decisions are probably made from this subconscious desire. You're probably being reactive in 80% of your life. Maybe you're not. Maybe you've got that percentage better. I know until the day I die, I'll always be working on giving more to God. Not being perfect. But I want to be as proactive as I can because that's biblical. That's discipline. That's getting close to the Father. That's not my will, but yours be done. Yeah. So I feel like the waking up, where do you see that starting? Because I feel like the waking up starts with the idea of, okay, my will is going to be corrupt. That's why Jesus, even though he was perfect, said, not my will, but yours be done. If he's doing that, that's what we should be on.
Yeah, so it almost gets to the point where you have to experience your own passions and desires, and you have to be skeptical of them. Why do I want? Yeah, why do I want to do this? And I know for me, so much. I got to be careful because so much of what I want out of life comes from a selfish place, right? So I make decisions. I think about like. It's weird. Like I can be kind to my wife, right? I can say beautiful things to her. And you would think, oh, isn't that beautiful? Like he's saying these beautiful things to her because he wants to make her feel good. No. I say beautiful things to her because if she feels good, then she's going to treat me well.
That's crazy.
Right?
But that's real though.
But yeah, that's the reality. So you almost have to like say, I want to do this, but why am I doing this? And what you brought up almost makes me wonder, do we have to wake up to the reality that our why probably is better coming from outside of us than inside
You
of us.
were never built to be a source.
Oh, wait. Okay, you got to explain that.
You were never built to be a source.
A source of what?
A source of your own desire. You're a vessel, not a source. So it's like you're the cord to the lamp. You're not the plug-in. You're not the wall outlet.
Gotcha.
Because a lot of times, it's like if you take like a small car, like a Camry or something, and you try to hook it up to a U-Haul trailer, that's not going to work. You were never built to pull that kind of weight. So the times that I've been the most desperate and the most frustrated is I'm trying to be the source of my own drive. I'm trying to take over, because you hear all these people saying like, you can do anything and you can, turn everything around and it's all up to you. I believe there's a degree of control that God gives us to be good stewards with what he gives us, but you weren't built to be the source. True freedom is in the surrender of saying, all right, God, I need a will, I need a why outside of my own. I've seen people who are motivated and who don't give up when it's hard because their why is outside of themselves. Even if it's not from God. Even if their why is, I don't want my family to struggle. Or their why is, I want to reach this specific kind of person. If their why is what we talked about earlier on one of the other episodes is, I want to be what younger me needed. Yeah. There's a lot of great whys that all have to come from outside of yourself. And the strongest one is, not my will, but yours be done. I feel like it's kind of like what you said is like, how do we become intentional about, like, if we really reflect and wake up to what is my real source right now? Yeah. So a personal story for me is like, I was sitting at this gas station a couple weeks ago, and I was thinking about it, and I was asking myself, why is it hard to stand up for what's right? Why isn't that second nature at this point? I've been in ministry for years. I've been doing these shows. I'm an example to a lot of people. And I can walk in when I'm Zanti and I'm in that mode. I can walk in and I can be a strong light. But when I'm around people that I know, how come I can do the right thing, but it's hard for me to hold other people accountable to that sometimes? Where does that come from? And I remember that the first time I ever got bullied was for holding people accountable. I was like 5 years old. It's like, guys, I don't think we should do this. That was the first time I ever got bullied. And then I looked back and I realized that there was patterns of that. Where life would try and mute me standing for what I believed in. The best players get the most defense. A lot of the defense that shows up in your life is wherever your calling is. So I saw this pattern. Every time that I was supposed to stand for something, there was a defense there. There was a pressure there. So that now that I have a platform, it's difficult to do that. When I realized the subconscious why, I was able to change it. Because now it was, God, I give you that. I'm not going to let that instance be the reason why it's hard for me to stand anymore. Now my why to stand is because not my will but yours be done. I'm just a vessel. I'm not a source anymore. Yeah.
I know for a long time in my ministry, my why was I wanted to be recognized. And you would think that the real why of ministry would be to impact people's lives. So as you stand up to preach, or as you visit someone in the hospital, or you do the normal ministry stuff that a pastor does, what I wanted out of that situation was for people to then say like, oh, wasn't it great that Milton came to visit me at the hospital? Wasn't it great that Milton preached that great sermon? Wasn't it great that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And that was the motivating factor. But here's the problem with that. The minute you don't get that, then you feel like you're a failure. Yeah. And maybe you're not supposed to do this thing. You're not called to do it. So the why has had to change, and it's still something that creeps up, right? Every once in a while, like wanting that recognition. Like I go out on a remote, with the radio station with Project 887, people come by and say, Chaplain Milton, oh, hey, and I'm like, huh. But it's not about that, right? It's about the lives that are impacted. So that's the why that's inside. Yeah. And I have to find the why that's outside, which I think brings the question up, because there are many places you can get your whys. 100%. You mentioned that we can get it in leadership, approaches and books and manuals. We can get it from society. We can get it from family, right? And those are all options, and some of them are decent. But I think what we're advocating here is the why that comes from God.
Because it's the why you were created for.
Yes, where you're plugged in.
That's why it's the most fulfilling.
So what is that why?
Yeah.
What do you think that why is from God?
I resonate with what you just said a lot too. Like, I felt that before. Being unseen, being left out, wondering, how come I'm treated this way? What's my purpose? And then that being kind of a driver for like wanting to be seen, wanting to be recognized. I feel like a lot of people understand that, because if you've always kind of been an outsider, or even if you have great family around you, or maybe great friends, nobody truly understands what it's like to live your life. And all of us kind of feel that at some points, wanting to be seen. I feel like what helped me, why that God gave me is so much better than any other solution that I found, is because it was the first time that I truly felt unconditional love. Even in family, even if they love you more than anything, there's still elements of that human experience where there's conditional love. Or how you act affects the way they love you. That's relationship. That's how it works. Your Father in heaven loves you regardless. End of story. And I think I didn't start understanding the value of that or feeling that till recently. Because a lot of times I would judge myself very heavily. And I'd be like, man, like, I'm not good enough. I got to get better. I got to do better. These, like, kind of like you said, you get addicted to positive affirmation.
Yeah.
And then when it's not there, it's like, man, what am I doing wrong? And you kind of are always searching externally for value.
Yeah.
The first time I really felt peace, and the reason why not my will but yours be done has become the center of all of my drive, the center of my heart, my engine, is because that's the only time I ever felt fulfilled. Because God loves me no matter what.
Yeah.
He loves me as I am. He loves me right now. And he loves me enough to know I don't have to stay this way.
Yeah.
Think about that. Like the dichotomy of I love you exactly how you are. You're beautiful to me. You're perfect. You're valuable. I would do anything for you. And so like you're good enough right now. But I also see what you could become. And I believe in that version of you too. I love you as you are, but I'm also going to help you get better. I've never found that anywhere else. That's why it's my motivation. That's why I flipped it. And you can be motivated by other whys. I'm still inspired by wanting to be an example for my siblings. I'm still inspired by wanting to be an example for people who listen to my music. But at the end of the day, all of that will fade. Eventually, there will be a point where me and my siblings all live in different homes with different families. Everybody grows up and moves apart, or there will be a time where I'm not doing music anymore, or social media is different and the engagement's not there, whatever, right? I got to have something that's going to last me through whatever I'm walking through.
Okay.
That's Jesus.
So that's the why.
That's the why
for you. Yeah, and I would add to that I think another aspect of the why is that God wants us to impact the people where we are. And that is a huge motivator, at least it is for me, to think when I'm facing a decision where I'm going to either go to the left or to the right, and the left is not right, is not what I'm supposed to do, and right is where I'm supposed to go. One of the things that comes to my mind, that God brings to my mind, is if you make this wrong decision, how will it impact the people that I've called you to impact? That's outside of me, right? I want to choose the thing that gives me the most joy in the moment, but God's not asking me to do that. So when I get the call at 1 o'clock in the morning from somebody who's struggling, I choose, do I answer the phone and keep sleeping? What works for me? Or do I answer the phone and get into this awful situation with this person who needs me right now that God has called me to shepherd? That's the why. That's the why. So I believe that the community is a huge why of what God is calling us to do. He's plugged us. He's asked us to plug into Him so that we can have an effect on the world that we live in. Yeah, that's the why. So here's the question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that practically.
Yes.
It's what's comfortable versus what's right. It's
I like the way you put that.
What benefits me versus not my will but yours be done.
Yes.
Jesus sets the perfect example of this on his way to Calvary. The sacrifice that he made is the worst thing that any human could experience. But for the joy set before him, Christ endured the cross. So he said, not my will, but yours be done. And God gave him the will. And it was the opposite of comfortable. And then he walked it.
Yeah.
So I feel like the practical application, how do I take this and use it for my life? Sit down. Assess what you do in your life, how you respond in situations. Pray without ceasing. God's word says to always be talking to him, always be dialoguing, always ask. So when you have a decision to make, regardless of the size of the decision, what's your will, God? Because becoming aware, being intentional about it, cuts off that reflex reaction that could be from a bad place. If you're aware and you're intentional, then life is not living you, you're living life. And so that's the practical application of not my will, but yours be done. That's the waking up, this is a decision that's facing me, and I'm not going to just reflex. I'm not going to be reactive. I'm going to be proactive. Here's how I die. God, I surrender. Not my will, but yours be done. And then that 1 a.m. call, what is his will? And 9 times out of 10, the will is it's not going to be fun or it's not going to be
10
comfortable.
out of 10.
Exactly.
Actually,
for
yeah.
real. But it's like every time that's happened though, where God has pushed me out of my comfort zone, it's like I remember this one time when I was little where I was terrified to go on this big slide at a water park.
Okay.
My mom didn't let me climb back down the ladder because she knew that she was like, look, when you're on it and when it's over, it's not going to be a problem. I'm going to teach you right here and now that you don't cop out if you're afraid. And I went down and it was fun and I went again, right? But like, it's just like that with God's will.
Right.
The biggest battle is right before you act.
Yeah.
Once you act, on the tail end of it, you're going to say, wow, you were right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you wanted.
You know what I'm realizing? That part of this process of discovering your why is to fight, to discover the why outside of you is you have to fight the why inside of you. Okay?
That's heavy.
Dude.
That's heavy. Say that again, bro.
So to discover the why outside of you, you have to fight the why inside of you. And here's how it practically happened for me, I remember in ministry. So at a church I was pastoring in, anytime you preached, when you were done with your message, you would walk all the way down to the end of the church and wait outside the exit doors so that everyone who left the church would shake your hand. They would shake your hand and say, great sermon, Pastor. Great sermon, Pastor. Great. And I loved that because it was instant affirmation. Instant affirmation. And as I'm growing in Christ, as I'm learning, as I'm realizing, like, this thing is feeding a part of me that I don't want fed. Mm-hmm. It's feeding a why that's taking me places I don't want to be. I'm not doing that anymore. Mm-hmm. So what I did instead was when I was done with my sermon, I would just walk down to the front row and I would just stay there. And then no one was forced to come by and tell me that I was great. Yeah. If they really wanted to say something because they were moved in some way and they wanted to thank me, they would have to make the effort to come. And then I knew it was genuine and I wasn't feeding myself with fake flattery and just becoming this egocentric pastor. So I had to change the routine so that I can make sure that I wasn't feeding that part of me that was hurting me. And I would encourage people to start doing that. Find out what's really like the bad why in you. I don't know. And just change your lifestyle and change your habits so that you're not feeding that part.
Yeah, because it's like you're going to face either one of two types of pain in your life, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Right? And so it's like you got to pick one. Yeah. There's no neutral. Jesus said, if you're not for me, you're against me. So we often believe that there's a middle ground, that we can kind of live life and be guided. But it's like if you stand in a river, you're not going to stay still. If you don't swim, the tide is going to move you. Yeah. Right? Same thing in life. There's no neutral. If you don't swim, you're going to get pulled. Yeah. I think what I like about the story you just told is that there was an intentional attack. Like, I'm becoming aware of a problem here. This is a why that's going to drive me subconsciously unless I attack it. Right. Now I'm going to confront my comfort. Now I'm going to step up to it. I think that Paul talks about that, I discipline my flesh. I daily crucify my flesh. Yeah. And I used to hear that a lot growing up. My dad would say it all the time. He would pray over the morning like, crucify our flesh. His words would be, I crucify my flesh the best that I know how. My whole life I heard him saying that. And I think it was one of those things that you just hear prayed and you're like, it's Christianese, but it's not. It's an intense, visceral phrase. When you really think about it, crucifixion is torture. It's execution. And it's like, I take everything that I would normally desire. That's a natural instinct that I have, the desires of my heart that are wicked above all else, and I'm nailing them piece by piece to the cross. I'm dragging them out of what I would normally choose, and I'm replacing that place in my heart with God's will. There's this story of Gideon that I always go back to, where Gideon is.
That's from the book of Judges.
Exactly, it's in Judges, and he's this guy who lives in Israel. He's one of God's people, and God calls him to be a military leader,
right,
to help them attack.
No experience.
This huge army. He's just this guy.
The smallest tribe, the smallest group of people from that whole Israelite nation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And God calls him to go and rally an army to fight the people who have them, under their thumb. And what's crazy about this story that a lot of us sweep over if we've heard it in church is there's this moment where he goes to the altar of Baal and the Asherah pole. So these false gods, altars that are in the nation that belongs to God. His chosen people, his own father, Gideon's father, had set up this altar on their property. And at night, he tears it down, piece by piece, just destroys this false altar. But he builds an altar to the Most High God on top of that ground. When I read that story, I apply it to my own life.
How so?
There are altars in our hearts that we need to tear down.
Okay.
Altars to a false god. What is an idol? It's something you put on a pedestal. Right. An idol is something you worship that takes precedent over God. Right. So with your decisions, what takes precedent over God? Your insecurity, anxiety, depression? What are the things that are motivating you right now? Pain, trauma? What, no matter how logical it is, no matter how justified it is.
Or real.
Or real it is. Those things are very real. That doesn't mean that they have the right to control your actions. It doesn't mean you're stuck with them.
Yeah.
It's not permanent. What is an idol? Rip it down. Right. I had to go back and I had to rip down all of the things that had built up over my lifetime. An idol is like stacks of rocks, so it's literally like one at a time, these things that build up higher and higher that hold you down, the heaviness of it. But one of the things that really stands out to me about that story is that he doesn't leave the space empty.
Right.
He builds an altar to God in that place. How do I tear down all of the stuff that's holding me back? And then how do I say, not my will, but yours be done? I build an altar to you, Lord. Yeah. Everything I do from here on out is you, Lord. I surrender. That's the only way I got over anxiety. I used to overthink every interaction. I used to be just terribly insecure. And the way that I beat that, practically, was not by having it all figured out. It was by saying, all right, God, I don't receive this anymore. This isn't who I am anymore. Yeah. So in these moments, instead of thinking about me, how does this make me look? What do they think about me? I'm thinking about how does it make you look?
Yeah.
Not my will, but yours be done. And I wasn't afraid anymore because it was not about me.
I think what you're saying is, to take it back to the why part, is we can remove a why, figure out what that why is that's hurting us, the internal why. We can remove it, but unless we replace it with something else, we don't actually get rid of it. It's not gotten rid of until we replace it with something else. So I think what we need to give some advice on or give some thoughts on, ideas on, is how do you now that you know this has to happen for you, how do you find that why outside of yourself? And I would say one of the first places to look for the specific why, and the language you want to put it in, is the people that are most important to you. How would you want to impact their lives so that their lives are the best lives possible? That is a huge motivator. And trust me, if you look to God for that, God wants you to impact them for good, for love. And you're going to find that that good and that love is what's going to generate your actions. It's going to generate your thought process. It's going to be the engine for the things you want to do. So look to the people you love the most for your why.
Yeah. I mean, You summed up exactly how I live my life now. I think a beautiful thought process is what I said a second ago is don't focus so much on you anymore. Mm-hmm. It's got to be outside of yourself. Not how does this make me look? Not how does this benefit me? Not how does this affirmation of a handshake at the end of my sermon help me? Not how does these comments and these shares help me? It's like, how does this help the individual?
Right.
My sister, that's my best friend, and at her graduation, I get emotional thinking about it, but she said, Z, you inspired me to know that it was possible to love Jesus and put him first and still do what you're called to do and have a career you're passionate about. What more could I want?
Right.
You know?
Right.
But I don't believe a couple of years ago that I would have been able to affect that change in her life or inspire her in her life like that until I got out of the way. Until it was all about, okay, Jesus, I just want you to be seen through my life. Back to Gideon, the beauty of his story is he ends up winning this battle, and he's the least qualified. Mm-hmm. He has like less than a quarter of the army that his opponent has. He has no experience. God is more glorified the less qualified we are.
That's good.
If our why is for others, if our why is, well, hey, I've been through hell, but I'm still here because of Jesus. I've written down some traumatic stories in my life, but now those stories are there for someone else to read. I'm not qualified, but that's what's beautiful. God gets glorified through that. If your why is truly outside of yourself, how do I affect others around me? How do I impact the world that I'm placed in? My circle is my circle for a reason.
Yeah.
It's all about everyone else. It's all about your Father in heaven. And then you find this fuel where there's no fear, there's a fire, because you start seeing one by one throughout your life people coming to you with those kinds of stories.
Yeah. Let me tell you that, and I've seen this over and over, especially in this role that I have here. We were out and about doing what we call the turkey drive, which is we bring turkeys for needy families. It's a Thanksgiving meal, right? Because there are families who aren't going to have Thanksgiving. And I remember one guy coming up, and you look at this guy and you knew this guy had been through it.
Yeah.
Like you knew he was coming from a hard place. And he walked up, and every turkey is $20. $20 is a meal. So he had a $20 bill in his hand. And he's like, hey, I'm here. I just got out of prison not too long ago. Now, the minute you hear that, you're just like, okay. Like, I know that's rough stuff right there. I just got out of prison, he says, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to have Thanksgiving this year. Because I just got out of prison. I don't even know what my life's going to be. But I have family, and I had friends come around me, and we're going to celebrate this season. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And he's like, and because of that, I want to make sure a family has the blessings that I have. And he gave the $20. A guy who just got out of prison, probably still looking for a job, he gave it. Why? Because when it's outside of you, the circumstances that you're in right now don't matter. They don't matter. You can still your why will go above and beyond the crap that you're experiencing right now, and it will always move you towards what's right.
That's good. That's the gospel. That's go and tell the world. Mm-hmm. That's be a city on a hill, which means like the life that you live should be a reflection of what God has done in you. If your why is motivated by closeness with your Father in heaven, saying, not my will, but yours be done, and your why is motivated on how can I impact the people that God places me around, everything shifts.
There you go.
Everything shifts, and you finally have purpose. For people ask me all the time after shows and stuff, well, I see you're in your calling. See, how do I find mine? Just get close to God. We're going to talk about that next time.
I was about to say, yeah.
Get close to God.
Yes.
Not my will, but yours be done.
Yeah.
Tear down the altar in your heart and build him an altar.
Yeah.
Choose a why that is from him. Choose a why that inspires others and honors your Father in heaven. I promise you that's where fulfillment kicks in.
So that's how you surrender the heart, and that's what we're talking about today. And we're going to be diving into even more of these areas. But people, until then, they need to go to wakeupdie.com. That's where the community is going to be continuing the conversation, and we're going to talk more. And we want to hear about what what your why is. We want to hear about where you are in this journey. We want to help you encapsulate your why so that you can have the energy and your engine can be running towards doing good. So it's wakeupdie.com. Such an awesome community we're building, and we can't wait for you to be a part of it.
For those of you who are watching this on YouTube, put it in the comments. What are you inspired by in this moment? What's your why? How can you move out of the way so that the world will know the God we follow? Keep waking up, keep dying, love God.